In this presentation, I will talk about the current state of information access in Turkey, and a little bit of the history and development that's moved Turkey to where it is today. Turkey is somewhat unique in its state of information access, being neither famously open, as in the US, or completely shuttered, as in North Korea. Turkey struggles somewhere in the middle. This lack of clear guidelines and definition is part of the struggle Turkey is facing. They are a parliamentary democracy, but one party continues to hold most of the power, which I will address later. Turkey's geographic location also provides conflicting influences on its approach to information access, from Greco-Roman sources in the north and the west to Islamic sources in the south and the east. The first library system I will address is public libraries. Public libraries in Turkey are currently incredibly centralized. All branches of public libraries are run by the General Directorate of Libraries and Publications. Even the collections of public libraries are mandated by the Regulation of Selection of Publications law. Only public libraries that are lucky enough to have extra local funding might buy new materials for their communities. However, there is a movement to decentralize public libraries also underway. It will allow local communities to control their needs and information access in better ways. Like much of the Turkish government, it is far from a settled issue. Public libraries in Turkey also have the burden of serving as public school libraries since most schools can't afford to house their own libraries. This is an issue public libraries are failing to address. Academic libraries are also an extremely important part of the information environment in Turkey. 44% of Turkey's population is under 25, and higher education is increasingly important. However, university libraries are playing catch-up. Individual institutions lack the massive collections of research universities that have been around for decades in other nations. There are solutions to Turkish universities' collection issues. The first is ANKOS, the Anatolian University Libraries Consortium. This consortium combines database services and material sharing for all major universities in Turkey. The number of subscribed universities has quintupled in the last decade, and the number of databases has tripled. In addition, libraries are using KITS, an interlibrary loan service, to streamline and allow for faster sharing of print materials. But it's not just information access in universities that's important, but also university studies of information access. Until recently, only one Turkish graduate program focused on information and library services. Since the addition of new programs, the number of dissertations and scholarly work on ILS has risen, but there's a lack of information on user studies within Turkey. Turkey's government is also an influence on its information access problems. They are extremely secular by constitutional mandate and tradition, and they have a robust marketplace of political parties. However, the Justice and Development Party, the AKP, has won majority parliamentary seats 3 election cycles in a row, which is a first in Turkish history. The AKP's increase in power in the last years has gradually shifted them from being left of center to right of center. The party has always had Islamic ties and roots, but has never been a formal Islamic party, as that is not allowed under the Constitution. In recent years, they've fought to remove bans on religious dress, and most importantly, have created intense internet censorship laws. This overshadows their economic growth and social welfare. The internet in Turkey first became a widespread option in 1993. The actual connectivity of Turks was not widespread at the time, even though the option was there. Libraries were the only early adopters of widespread usage, as various economic collapses caused print collection budgets to dwindle. Larger uses of the internet was hindered early by an infrastructure that could not support it. In fact, only 7% of Turks had access to the internet from home as of 2007, a time when well over 60% of people in most developed nations could access it from home. This number is actually lower in rural areas. The rural population's lack of internet drastically hurts their information needs. They can't participate in e-commerce, e-government, or various online educational opportunities. In addition to the barriers of practicality and physical environment, internet censorship is incredibly widespread in Turkey. Open access to information is harshly controlled, and entire websites like YouTube and Twitter are routinely pulled in the face of hosting political dissent. There's currently no body of Turkish law which regulates or controls the internet. User behavior and content are not officially policed, but routine censorship and shutdowns of websites happen anyway. It is just that the censorship and shutdowns are not regulated. An act was proposed that would create a radio and television higher council, which would govern internet behavior. It was passed in Parliament. However, the Radio and Television Higher Council Act was vetoed by the President, a high-ranking AKP member. The act would have removed control of the internet to an independent body, which would run contradictory to the AKP's goals. A much stricter National Information Security Act was then introduced by the AKP, which made all data in Turkey subject to government inspection and control. This failed to pass, and as of now, there's no body of law that has come up as a viable option. Freedom of the press is also a huge issue in Turkey. The AKP, and especially their newest president-elect, have been incredibly active in jailing journalists. Charges leveled against journalists include terrorism, anti-government plots, and treason. Legislation was passed in 2002 that spoke to increase journalist rights, which looked promising. However, this legislation was passed just before constitutional amendments were approved, making coverage of the judicial system incredibly limited. These amendments also restricted the right to cover national security issues, moral issues, and most ominously, human rights. Continuing coverage of the political strife in Turkey between the Kurdish and Turkish people is also almost guaranteed to label you a terrorist. There is no practical freedom of the press. However, Turkey is working in one way to increase the availability of information. The Turkish law on the right to information was enacted in 2003 and is part of a package of legislation being passed in 2003 onward dealing with archives and government records. Records and statistics generated by various government agencies are moving towards being publicly available for use by scholars and officials in other agencies. Of course, in light of the efforts by the government to censor information on other platforms, it should not be taken for granted that all or even most government research is actually being archived. In fact, the Law on the Principles of Public Administration and its Reorganization, which was originally drafted in 2008, has still not passed. This is a law that seeks to pass records management from the central government to local governments. Finally, I'd like to address the information needs of underserved populations in Turkey, specifically women and the LGBTQ community. Women are being underserved primarily in digital ways. Their lack of the internet stems from the lack of in-home access, while men can easily access the internet from school or work. Members of the LGBTQ population also lack access to information, as Turkish society is extremely negative about homosexuality. Generally, the information landscape in Turkey is average. For traditional academic study, great strides are being taken to improve data information accessibility. Primary schools and public libraries are focusing on their community's needs and improving access as well. The main issues, the real problems, center around political dissent and commentary. Thank you.